We know that the sagas of Icelanders were mostly composed in the 13th and early 14th centuries. We also know that during this same time, a number of saints' lives were translated, composed, and recontextualized in Iceland. The two corpora are hardly comparable in terms of content, but what about style? The conventional view is that Old Norse Icelandic prose literature as a whole has two basic literary styles. A learned style, which was used for loftier subjects, such as lives of saints, sermons, and other churchly material, and a popular style, the simple and objective style we find in the sagas of Icelanders. The learned style is emotional and laden with sentimental adjectives, while the popular style is more compact. The learned style pertains to the field of translations, while the popular style is found in indigenous literature. This conventional view, however, was elaborated by scholars in the mid to late 20th century. It has been stressed that in its earliest form, hagiographic literature seems to be written in a popular rather than learned style. Margaret Cormack has addressed the issue in her writings.
Straightforwardly. What interested me more in working with these things would be a distinction between oral and learned style, something that scholars like to argue about a lot. You're probably aware that there are two different stages of translations of hagiography. The first translations, some of which are actually made in Norway, not Iceland, date from the 12th century and are fairly straightforward translations of single Latin works, aiming at providing basic information. They might become a little bit more saga-like by skipping over long rhetorical passages found in the Latin, but on the whole, they're fairly straightforward translations into decent Icelandic. In the second period, beginning somewhere in the 13th century, we find the authors are assuming that people know the basic stories, and they revise some of these works, including they make second versions of sagas that already existed. They revise them stylistically. They make the styles much more Latinate. This doesn't mean that they are translating directly from Latin. It means that they are using sort of Latin rhetorical features. The saga style is becoming more florid, if we want to use a term that is also applied to translations of chivalric sagas, which are also being made at precisely this time. So it's a translation style that seems to be effective across genres when you're dealing with translations, whether from Latin or from Anglo-Norman. Now, that's one way in which they revise. But another way is to make these second wave hagiographical works more saga-like. They will incorporate alliteration as a stylistic device. They will add information about characters when the character is introduced into the story, which does not happen in the Latin. You're just assumed to know it, I guess. So they adjust these stories for an Icelandic audience, as well as using a variety of sources to put together their revised styles. And we know that in some cases, people really went for the new versions. The second saga of St. Nicholas appears to be really popular. And in one church, we know that they had two sagas of St. Nicholas, an old one and a new one. And the new one was evidently considered much more sort of up-to-date and cool than the original one. Although there are some traces of Latin in the sagas of the native saints, Thorlákur, Jón, and Guðmundur, these are, in fact, very oral sounding, especially in the stories about the miracles. Those are highly paratactic. They consist of phrases linked together by and then, and next, and then he said, and then she said, and then, and then, and then. And your sentence is about 2 paragraphs long before you can consider it finished. Okay? The later versions of these sagas, even though the saga itself may be written in a very florid, learned style, still tends to have these miracles that sound awfully oral. So if we want original oral style, my advice to students is look to the miracles in the lives of the native saints, because those are likely to be folklore that has been written down.